Mike Pence is really making the rounds these days, trying to get back in the public conversation, and I think possibly bolster himself enough in the public image and get popular enough where he could run for president. Let's make something clear, especially you'll believe this even harder once you watch these clips from this town hall he did, but he will never win a Republican primary, much less a national election. I've talked about how I respect what he did on January 6th. He did the correct thing, and that was good. And I do think it took courage. Since then, he's been MIA largely, which is such a low character move in such a crucial moment in American history. And then we watch when he finally does speak to January 6th. He's so soft, as you'll see in this town hall. So Jake Tapper did a CNN town hall with Mike Pence, and most of it, even though he'll make correct points about January 6th, it was just revealing how low character he is, I guess. He's not brave enough to fully stand against a very dangerous movement because he wants to capitalize off of that movement in this distorted part of his brain, thinking that he could somehow unite the Republican Party with the MAGA and the moderates to become the Mike Pence party, which, again, it just won't happen. He should take the high road. He should step away for a moment and decide to fight this very dangerous part instead of lightly criticizing and then also wanting to get the support of. First question Jake Tapper asks is about individuals Pence supported who, if you believed his previous statements about some of the radical parts of the Republican Party, you would think he wouldn't go and support, but he did in this midterm election. Take a look.
Talking about the 2022 election, and I think that your analysis is one that is generally accurate, that the candidates who were hung up on the election lies of 2020 did not fare as well in 2022 as the ones who stepped forward and talked about the future. Mm-hmm. And I know you know better than anyone in a bad way what those election lies can mean in terms of crowds being incited. Mm. I was surprised to see you campaigning for Don Baldock in New Hampshire and Blake Masters in Arizona, who were two people who lied about the election, who defeated, one could argue, better candidates in the Republican primaries, who were future-leaning candidates. Why did you endorse them? Why did you support them? Why did you campaign for them?
Well, you know, I've often said I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. But I'm a Republican.
I think he expected a response there. Got nothing from the audience.
Everybody to clap.
No.
Republican. And once Republican primary voters had chosen their nominees, I went out and traveled to 35 states over the last year and a half to see if we could elect a Republican majority in the House and Senate, elect Republican governors all across the country. It didn't mean, as it hasn't meant in the past, that I agree with every statement or every position candidate.
So, gosh, that is so backwards for you to admit that these lies about the election were dangerous, and for you to have experienced the worst outcome of those lies in them trying to hang you because you didn't go along with this bizarre, distorted plan that Trump and his allies had concocted, and you recognize that threat, but then go out and support people who have spread those same lies. So backwards, and it shows I don't really know where he stands on these things. I'm sure he didn't like being threatened, and I'm sure that angered him, but maybe he genuinely, I think he does, just values holding on to the tiny chance he has of holding a little bit of support in this movement above making the correct choice morally. Here's another moment where he talks about January 6th.
The president looked up at me and...
So this is when Trump and him talked after January 6th.
He asked if Karen and Charlotte were okay. And I said tersely, "They're fine, Mr. President." And he said, "Were you scared?" And I said, "No, I was angry. I was angry about the differences we had, and I told him seeing those people ransacking the Capitol infuriated me." But we sat for more than an hour and a half.
I'm sorry, I just have to say, he is an example of a politician manufactured in the politician factory who is just so robotic and standard and basic. It's just annoying to watch. Sorry.
And I was candid with the president about my disappointment. And I must tell you that I sensed the president was deeply remorseful in that moment. Now, I know that's at odds with people's public perception about him, but I want to tell you it was true.
So he sensed, he didn't say a phrase that Trump used that would indicate remorse. He didn't answer for the countless things Trump said after January 6th that indicate he's not remorseful at all. Instead, he said he sensed that Trump was remorseful, again, trying to paint Trump in a less bad light than the one he actually should be painted in. What are you doing, Michael? I don't even know if that's his full name. Probably Michael Pence. Here's another moment, him responding to the Hang Mike Pence video.
But frankly, when I saw those images, and when I read a tweet that President Trump issued saying that I lacked courage in that moment, it angered me greatly. But to be honest with you, I didn't have time for it. The president had decided in that moment to be a part of the problem. I decided and was determined to be part of the solution. And so we essentially set that aside. I collected the Republican and Democrat leadership of the House and Senate on a conference call, and we began to work the problem.
So again, I'll say, if you look at the footage behind the scenes, if you hear about accounts of what Pence was doing, he acted downright correct on that day. And I respect him for it, or I respect what he did that day. So when he talks about the moments of January 6th, everything's correct. But then, of course, the most amount of strength that he can muster against Trump is, it deeply angered me. He wanted to be a part of the problem, but not recognizing the larger threat that type of ideology poses. This isn't just about the one disagreement, as you'll call it, between you and him. This is about an assault that he led on our democratic processes, and the idea that he should have stayed in power despite losing the 2020 election. And that's what led to the events of January 6th. So here maybe is a little bit of why I'm particularly upset with Mike Pence right now. In a different interview, he got asked about why he's not going to testify in front of the January 6th Select Committee, and goes back to kind of the dishonesty we saw all throughout 2016 through 2020 from him.
Written in person for the January 6th committee. Do you
I'll start
believe,
that back.
though, do you intend to ever sit and answer questions written in person for the January 6th committee? Do you believe, though, that the public deserves that? Is this interview it? Is this book it? Or will you answer questions about that day before Congress?
Well, I shared my heart and I shared my story in this book, and we'll continue to speak openly about it, I expect, to some degree for the rest of my life. But from the time that January 6th was formed, and every member was appointed by the Democrat Speaker of the House, I was concerned.
But your chief of staff spoke to them, Mark Short, your legal counsel, Greg Jacobs, testified.
So he says that the reason he's not going to comply, or not comply, but not show up to a January 6th Select Committee testimony is because it's all led by a Democratic leader. The Democratic leader got to pick who was on the committee. Mike Pence, the Republicans didn't go along with the first attempt to make it bipartisan. Do you not remember that? They said they did not want to be a part of the initial proposal for this investigatory committee within Congress that would have been purely bipartisan, even split. They didn't go along with that. So then the Democrats had to adjust, and they did what they did. Gosh.
I'll get to that. But
You don't want to engage with them at all?
No, I served for 12 years in the Congress. It's inconceivable to me that one party would appoint every member of a committee.
Yeah, and it's inconceivable to me that the party you're holding water for right now didn't want to be a part of an investigation looking into what happened on January 6th.
Congress.
leaving the Democratic Party no option.
That's antithetical to the whole idea of the committee system. That being said, I never stood in the way of senior members of my team cooperating with the committee and testifying. But Congress has no right to my testimony.
Congress has no right to my testimony. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is what enrages me so much. He's selling a book, lots of it he's talking about the January 6th events, and he wants to paint himself as the hero, which in a very limited sense, there were some people who acted correctly in a great way on January 6th that prevented a worse thing from happening with our democracy, and Mike Pence was one of them. But you don't get to now be the hero if you're not going to be a part of further holding people accountable. And one of the parts we were doing to do that was the January 6th Select Committee, and you're not being a part of that solution. And so it shows that maybe you don't actually care about this as much as you should. And that really bothers me. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show hours before any of the clips are uploaded to YouTube, plus get access to an extra full show every Saturday that only members can see, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Luke Beasley. That's patreon.com/Luke Beasley, and there is a link in the description.